Why did everyone stop talking when she walked in? Her sneakers crunched against the gravel outside the precision point shooting range. The sound sharp, almost defiant in the quiet morning air. She didn't have the look of anyone who belonged. There, no high-end gear, no sleek tactical vest, just faded jeans, a simple gray hoodie, and scars that trailed down her left arm like a broken river. Inside, polished marble floors gleamed under expensive lighting. The air smelled faintly of gun oil, but layered with cologne that cost more than her month's rent. Trophy cases lined the walls, each a shrine to shooters whose names appeared in glossy magazines. Elena Martinez paused for a heartbeat, letting the door swing shut behind her. She didn't flinch when she felt eyes on her, though she noticed every single stare. They were quick, judgmental glances. She must be lost, someone muttered. Probably somebody's wife. Dropping off lunch, another voice smirked, just loud enough to be heard. She kept walking at 34. Elena didn't look like a member of their world. Her hair was tied back in a plain ponytail. No salon highlights, no effort to impress. Her hoodie had been washed to softness, with a small tear near the pocket she'd never bothered to fix. Her jeans were the kind you buy from discount racks, not boutique displays. But the scars, those couldn't be ignored. Thick, raised lines started at her wrist and crawled up. Under her sleeve, twisting like vines, the room's tone shifted in tiny, subtle ways when those scars came into view. She carried only a basic black duffel bag. The kind you find for $20 at a surplus store. The kind that had been to places she didn't talk about. Inside, wrapped in an old towel, was her Beretta M9. Standard military issue. She'd had it for over a decade. It had been with her on missions no one in this room could even imagine. But here, none of that mattered. Here, she was just a woman in worn sneakers and a gray hoodie, stepping into a place built for people with money. The conversations around her had the easy tone of wealth. Men in pressed polish and designer shooting glasses were talking about their latest rifle builds, each modification costing more than Elena's monthly rent. Near the premium lanes, a woman with perfectly manicured nails adjusted a scope on a rifle that could have paid for Elena's car twice over. Her name, Elena overheard, was Jessica Chun. Her Instagram was probably filled with staged photos of this hobby, tactical outfits that had never seen dirt, rifles that had never been fired outside of climate-controlled comfort. Jessica's shooting glasses alone cost $800. Elena stepped up to the counter. The woman behind it, young blonde highlights, company polo shirt, wore the kind of smile you learn in customer service training, but it faltered when her eyes swept over Elena's hoodie, her sneakers, her scars. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but laced with something less welcoming. "I'd like to rent lane time," Elena said quietly. Her voice carried a hint of a Texas border town, a ghost of old military bases. "1 hour, please." The woman's name tag read Sarah. Her eyes lingered on Elena's arm. Her clothes, her plain duffel. "This is a premium facility," she explained. Carefully, "our lanes start at $75 an hour. Equipment and ammo are extra. Most people spend $200, maybe more." Elena reached into her hoodie pocket. Her wallet was worn leather, edges soft with age. She pulled out bills, exact ones. 320s, a 10, a 5, 1 hour, she repeated. Sarah hesitated, just long enough to let the silence speak. "Do you have your own firearm? Or will you need to rent?" "I have my own. Proof of training or certification." Without a word, Elena unzipped her duffel side pocket. A laminated card slid across the counter. Texas Concealed Carry Permit. Sarah studied it like a border guard, looking for an excuse to say no. "This expires next month," she said. "It's valid today." Reluctantly, Sarah processed the payment and handed over a clipboard. "Waivers, liability forms. Lane 12, she said, pointing to the far end. Elena glanced that way. Lane 12 was the loneliest strip in the range, past a concrete pillar that would keep her out of sight from the premium crowd. The kind of lane you assigned to people you didn't want anyone to see. She just nodded. As she walked, the laughter started. Quiet at first, then sharper. Marcus Webb, the golden boy of the range, noticed her. 28 lean competition pistol, always spotless. Patches from tournaments stitched onto his jacket. Like a uniform of ego. Look at that, he murmured. To a friend, smirking. Someone's lost. Jessica Chun turned to watch. A smirk forming on perfect lipstick lips. Is this place letting anyone in now? Elena kept walking. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse in Afghan mess halls. She'd been the woman in the room who wasn't supposed to be there. In briefings, the one whose accent made certain officers underestimate her. She'd fought through all of it. A few rich civilians with expensive toys weren't going to break her stride. At lane 12, she set the duffel down. The table was scratched, the lighting dimmer than the premium lanes. But that suited her. Distance, privacy. Elena unzipped the bag with the neat, economical movements of someone who had packed and unpacked gear under fire. The Beretta came out first, worn metal, still flawless in function. Behind her, the whispers grew louder. Someone's phone clicked, the unmistakable sound of a picture taken. Someone giggled. They didn't see her hands stay steady as she loaded the magazine. They didn't notice how smooth her movements were. A man approached, middle-aged, range. Safety vest on. He didn't carry himself like the others. There was something in his posture. His eyes. First time at precision point? He asked quietly. Yes. His name tag read Tommy Rodriguez. He nodded slightly toward the premium lanes. Don't mind them. They're all noise. You need anything, just flag me down. She looked at him, saw something familiar in his belay. Eyes, a quiet understanding. Thank you. She stepped to the firing line, feet set just so. Grip perfect. When she raised the Beretta, there was no hesitation, no adjustment. The first shot cracked, sharp in the air, across the room. Conversations. Paused for a beat. Then resumed, louder than before. She didn't react, just shifted slightly. Breathed. Fired again. At the end of lane 12, paper tore in the same spot. Hole through hole. Each shot was calm, controlled. But what no one else knew. Was that for Elena? Each shot was something more. Each one a memory. Each one a prayer for friends who never made it home. And though she kept her face still, there was something under her calm that no one could see. Yet, because there was something she hadn't told them not yet. Why did the laughter get louder after every shot she fired? The third round snapped through the air, sharp and crisp, echoing off the concrete walls of the range. The smell of gunpowder drifted over lane 12, sharp, metallic, familiar. Elena barely blinked. Her breathing stayed steady, her stance rooted. But somewhere behind her, the smirks were turning into open comments. Guess anyone can just walk in here now. A man's voice muttered. She's probably filming a TikTok. Another added, his tone carrying that smug certainty of someone who had never once been under fire or under pressure. The words were designed to bounce off, to be ignored, but she could feel them pressing against her anyway, like small, sharp stones thrown. At the edges of her focus, she reloaded, each motion precise, unhurried. And in that stillness, the whispers spread like cracks in glass. Jessica Chun leaned against the divider of her lane, her designer shooting vest spotless, her nails immaculate as she toyed with the safety on a rifle that had never seen dirt. She tilted her head, eyes fixed on Elena, as though she were an exhibit that didn't quite belong. Maybe she's here to clean something, she mused aloud. Her voice honey-sweet, but cutting. Laughter rippled through the premium lanes. Elena didn't flinch. She raised the Beretta, sighted, fired. The bullet punched through the same hole again. the grouping so tight that the paper target sagged where the cluster had eaten away at its center. The sound of someone's phone clicking again reached her ears. Not one photo this time. Several. A chuckle followed. Somewhere in the corner, Jessica was already crafting a caption in her mind. But at lane 12, Elena's face remained still. She'd learned a long time ago not to give them anything. Not the satisfaction of a reaction. Not a flicker of anger. Not a drop of weakness. Her focus was absolute, almost unnervingly calm. To anyone who truly knew, her stance would have been a dead giveaway. Feet just the right width apart. Shoulders square, breathing controlled. Every trigger pulled the same rhythm. Inhale, pause, squeeze. To the casual eye, she was simply good. But to the trained eye, someone like Tommy Rodriguez, she was something else entirely. He'd seen it before, that stillness, that razor-edge precision, that unspoken awareness of space, of angles, of danger. It wasn't just hobby shooting. It was muscle memory from another life. He walked over between the rounds, speaking softly so the others wouldn't hear. "You served?" Elena glanced at him for the briefest flicker of a second. A simple look that said nothing and everything. Tommy didn't push. He simply nodded as if to say, "I thought so." Behind them, Marcus Webb's voice carried, loud enough to draw attention. He'd moved closer now, curiosity and competition tangled together in his smirk. Marcus was Precision Point's Golden Boy state champion, trust fund shooter, the kind of man who spent more on custom ammo than most people did on rent. He watched as Elena's second target came forward on the retrieval system. The grouping was even tighter than the first. The smirk faltered for half a second, then returned like armor. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. But his voice lacked conviction. Brad Thompson, standing beside him, older, heavier, with the easy arrogance of someone who thought money could buy skill, leaned in. "Or YouTube videos," he said, laughing. Jessica joined, brushing invisible dust off her vest. "Or," she added, her voice dripping mock sympathy, "she just wants to feel tactical." Another ripple of laughter, the kind that stings because it's not loud enough to confront, but sharp enough to pierce. Elena's face didn't change, but there was a small tightening in her jaw, just for a second, before it smoothed away. She loaded another magazine, standard 9mm rounds. Nothing exotic, nothing flashy, but each one slid into the chamber with the quiet assurance of someone who'd done this more times than she could count. Her Beretta wasn't a competition pistol or a polished showpiece. It was a weapon, and in her hands, it became what it always had been, an extension of herself. She fired again. 5 shots, fast, almost too fast. The sound startled even Jessica, who instinctively stepped back when the target rolled forward. The 5 rounds formed a perfect star. Around the bullseye, every shot exactly where it was meant to be. For a long, suspended second, the room went still. Even the conversations in the premium lanes paused. Then Marcus Webb, defensive now, tried to recover lucky shots. He muttered, but the unease was there, faint as smoke, because luck didn't fire 5 shots in under 3 seconds and hit everyone. Luck didn't stand like that. Luck didn't breathe like that. Jessica's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, her manicured nails tapping against the rail as she looked Elena up and down like she was reading a file. Her gaze stopped on the scars. "Interesting." "Mark," she said, voice faux sweet. "Looks painful. Accident?" Elena's hand paused for the tiniest heartbeat as she loaded her next round. The scars, thick, twisted, pale against tan skin, told the story she never wanted to speak aloud, of metal twisted by heat, of fire on a road outside Kandahar, of the convoy that never made it back whole, of 3 weeks in a field hospital, watching names she knew by heart turn into lists she wished she didn't, of the Bronze Star she never claimed because surviving felt like failing when others didn't. But she didn't say any of that. Something like that, she replied quietly. Jessica tilted her head, lips curving. Must make it hard to hold a weapon steady. Nerve damage and all that. The mock sympathy burned more than open cruelty ever could. Elena didn't answer. She raised her Beretta instead. 5 more rounds, faster this time. The shots came so quickly, they blurred into one sound, nearly automatic. The target lurched back on the retrieval line. A single hole, a single obliterated center. The range fell silent again, longer this time. Even Marcus Webb didn't speak. He just stared, his shooter's brain wrestling with the impossible truth. This wasn't hobby-level skill. This was something else entirely. Elena lowered the weapon, calm as ever, and began unloading the magazine with the same neat precision. Her hour wasn't up, but she had already done what she came to do. She wasn't there for them. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to make sure she hadn't lost it, that the thing she built in deserts and under fire was still there. Because for Elena, every shot meant more than paper holes, each. One was a promise to ghosts she carried, silent and heavy. Behind her, the whispers resumed, sharper this time, bolder. The kind of casual cruelty that people with money mistake for entertainment. And yet, none of them knew that someone else was watching too. Outside, in the parking lot, a black SUV idled, government plates, tinted windows. Whoever sat inside wasn't there for Jessica's laugh or Marcus's pride. They were there for the woman on lane 12, the one who hadn't told them her story, not yet. Why did Marcus Webb walk closer, like he needed to see for himself? The paper target slid forward again, its center a ragged hole. No one spoke at first. It wasn't just good shooting. It wasn't even great shooting. It was something that didn't belong in a civilian range. Marcus couldn't ignore it. He'd been precision point's star for years, the guy other shooters measured themselves against. But the grouping on that target made his own look sloppy. He crossed from the premium lanes to lane 12, his holster gleaming, his jacket covered in competition patches. The swagger was still there, but underneath it, something else had crept in. A hint of doubt. Mind if I take a look? He asked, not waiting for an answer before stepping closer. Elena didn't move to stop him. He studied the paper. His smirk thinned. This isn't beginner's luck, he said finally, his voice quieter now, like he didn't want to admit it. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? Elena slid another magazine into place. Practice, she said simply. Marcus let out a half laugh, forced. Yeah, but where? That's military precision you serve. The question hung between them. For a moment, Elena considered telling him about the 3 tours, the convoy that didn't come home, the scars that weren't from an accident. But experience had taught her one thing. The truth often made people more uncomfortable than wise. She loaded another round. Just practice, she repeated. Marcus's pride bristled. He couldn't accept being outshot by someone in thrift store clothes who wouldn't even acknowledge his expertise. That Beretta, he said, nodding at her weapon. Military surplus, right? It works, she replied, chambering around with movement smooth enough to feel choreographed. Behind him, Jessica Chun had drifted closer. Curiosity, sharp and cat-like, sparkled in her eyes. She wore her tactical vest like a runway accessory. Empty magazine pouches sewn on for the look, not for use. That's an interesting scar, she said, her voice dripping that sugary poison. Looks painful accident? The words sliced through the air like a knife. Elena's hand paused for just a breath, just long enough for someone looking closely to see the flicker. But her face? Still, something like that, she answered. Jessica's lips curved. Must make it hard to hold a weapon steady, she said sweetly. I mean, nerve damage and all that. Elena didn't speak. She raised the Beretta, and then 5 rounds shattered to silence, fast, brutal. The kind of speed that came from training where hesitation meant death. Each round hit the same place. The same hole. When she lowered the weapon, the target looked like it had been punched by a single invisible hammer. The laughter died for a moment. Even Jessica's smirk faltered. Tommy Rodriguez, the range safety officer, just watched quietly. He didn't say a word, but his eyes told the truth. He'd seen this before. It wasn't the hobbyist's kind of skill. It was the kind that kept people alive. The kind that came from places you didn't talk about later. Elena set the Beretta down, calm as ever, and began packing up. Her hour wasn't over, but she'd already done what she came for. Checked the one thing that mattered, that the muscle memory, the control, the edge, hadn't dulled. The whispers picked up again as she zipped the duffel. "Lucky shots," Marcus muttered again, but the words sounded thinner now, more like a shield for his own bruised pride. Jessica leaned on the divider, snapping a photo with her phone. "Cute stance," she murmured, already crafting the caption in her head. It would go online within minutes. #range poser #precision point standards already. Likes and comments were waiting. People eager to mock someone they'd never met. Brad Thompson, watching from the lounge, laughed too loudly, as if his voice could keep the social hierarchy in place. "You know," he said, "this is a private club. We have standards here." Elena met his gaze for the briefest second. "I paid for an hour," she said evenly. "I'll use my hour." The words were quiet, but there was something in them. Something that made Brad step back. Just slightly, he covered it with a scoff. "Membership fee," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "This isn't a public range. We expect a certain level." The lie slid out smoothly. Men like Brad were good at that. Turning money into weapons. Using rules that didn't exist to push people out. But Elena didn't argue. She'd learned long ago which battles mattered. This one didn't. She finished packing, and as she zipped the bag, someone behind her whispered just loud enough. "Maybe she's filming targets. Probably posting about the place." Someone else laughed. "Careful. She might write a Yelp review." Another chuckle, another click of a phone camera. Jessica grinned as her notifications buzzed. The first photo was already online. Elena, frozen mid-shot. Hoodie loose, scars visible. The caption? "When you watch too many action movies and think you're special forces." Likes appeared. Comments followed. "Call of Duty much?" "Someone tell her this isn't a video game." The giggles grew. The phone stayed up, but not everyone in the room was laughing. Tommy saw it. The shift. The way they weren't just mocking her now. They were dismantling her, piece by piece. And yet, Elena's face stayed still. She'd heard worse in the places she'd been. The enemy had shown more respect than these people. She slung the duffel over her shoulder. The motion smooth, final. She'd done what she came to do. And she was ready to leave. But as she walked toward the exit, something caught her eye. A black SUV in the parking lot. Government plates, tinted windows. It hadn't been there when she walked in. And it wasn't just parked. It was waiting. For her. She didn't stop walking. Didn't change her pace. Didn't let the people behind her see the small flicker of tension cross her shoulders. Because whatever was waiting outside wasn't theirs to see. Not yet. Why was that black SUV still there when she pushed open the door? The morning sun had shifted, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. Her worn sneakers hit the concrete with the same steady rhythm they'd had walking in. But something had changed. The air felt heavier. The SUV's windows were tinted too dark to see inside. But Elena didn't need to. She'd seen that kind of vehicle before. Overseas, on dusty roads, stateside, outside military bases. Government plates, government stance. She didn't look directly at it. Just kept walking toward her car. The 15-year-old Honda Civic that rattled slightly when she closed the door. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel. Knuckles white for just a second before she forced herself to relax. "Breathe, Elena. Just breathe." The engine coughed twice before turning over. In the mirror, she saw the SUV still parked there, unmoving, watching. She drove off, deliberately slow, like she didn't notice, but her heart beat faster with every turn. 2 blocks away, she glanced again. The SUV hadn't followed. Her breath loosened, but only slightly, because in her world, the absence of pursuit didn't always mean safety. Sometimes, it meant the opposite. Back at Precision Point, the conversations didn't stop just because she had walked out. If anything, they grew louder. Jessica Chun stood in the lounge, her designer vest perfectly tailored, her phone buzzing like a live wire. 50 likes already. She grinned, showing Marcus her screen. The photo was Elena mid-shot. The scars on her arm visible, her hoodie loose and unremarkable. The caption: "When you try to crash the party, but forget to check the dress code." Hashtags. Hashtag Precision Point Standards. Hashtag Know Your Place. Another giggle, another ping. Someone chimed. And from the premium lanes, she's probably one of those wannabe soldier types. You know, thank me for my service, all that, Jessica smirked. We're just lonely. People like that usually are. The laughter spread. Phones clicked within an hour. The first meme appeared, her stance frozen mid-aim, a caption slapped across. When you shop at Goodwill but want to feel tactical. It was shared, reshared, and reshared again. By the time Alana reached her apartment, the meme had been reposted over 200 times in their private social circles. She didn't know any of it yet. She pulled into the cracked parking lot of her building, the kind of place with peeling paint and an elevator that worked more often than not. Mrs. Chun, not Jessica, but her elderly neighbor, was waiting outside with a grocery list clutched in her hand. "Elena, you're a lifesaver," the old woman said softly. "I can't carry the heavy things anymore." Elena smiled faintly, taking the paper. "Of course, Mrs. Chun, I'll get them after work." The normalcy of it grounded her for a moment. She climbed the stairs, unlocked the door to her 1-bedroom apartment, and dropped her duffel gently by the wall. Inside, the life she'd built for herself was small, quiet, and intentional. A laptop on the kitchen table, stacks of documents, translation work for a legal firm that paid just enough to keep the lights on. A plant on the windowsill she wasn't sure would survive another month. She picked up her phone to check the time. That's when she saw it. Notifications, dozens of them. She barely used social media, mostly to keep in touch with old friends. But her name was suddenly tagged everywhere. The first post made her stomach tighten. Her face, her scars, the caption: "Found the wannabe soldier." Another: "Someone tell her this isn't a charity range for military rejects." Her hand tightened. Around the phone, she'd faced worse. She reminded herself, enemy propaganda. Taliban wanted posters with her name and face on them, but this was different. These weren't enemies. These were her own, her fellow citizens, the very people she had served to protect. The mockery cut deeper because it came from the place she bled for, at Precision Point. The cruelty wasn't slowing down. Jessica was thriving in the spotlight. 500 likes, she beamed, refreshing her feed. Maybe I should be an influencer. Marcus wasn't laughing quite as much. He was looking at Elena's abandoned targets, the ones he'd quietly pulled from lane 12. He stared at the grouping, his brows furrowed. The holes were too tight, too deliberate. He'd been shooting competitively for 8 years. He knew what good looked like. And this wasn't good. It was flawless. Still thinking about her, Brad Thompson asked, setting down a case of ammo with a thud. Marcus didn't look up. "Something doesn't add up," Brad scoffed. "Let it go. She's yesterday's news." But Marcus couldn't. He traced the cluster of bullet holes with his finger, unsettled, because that kind of precision didn't come from weekend practice or YouTube tutorials. It came from somewhere else, somewhere harder, somewhere real. Sarah, the range instructor, was at the front desk scrolling through Elena's intake form on her tablet. She'd memorized the name already. Elena Martinez, address: a modest apartment complex by the highway. Figures. she muttered under her breath. A few clicks later, she found her almost empty Facebook profile. Barely any posts, she told Jessica, who was leaning over. Just a few photos of her. And some old military friends. Jessica wrinkled her nose. Military? Looks like it, Sarah replied. Explains the shooting, I guess. Marcus froze. Military. It made sense, but instead of softening his voice, it only sharpened something inside him. That defensiveness, that bruise to his pride. So she's some washed-up soldier, he said, laughing too loudly. Probably got kicked out, drugs or something. Explains the hoodie. The group laughed with him, but it wasn't as easy this time, because even they could feel it. The unease creeping in. Tommy Rodriguez sat back in his chair, arms crossed, watching. He didn't join the laughter. Didn't scroll, didn't post. He'd seen shooters come and go. Cops, veterans, pretenders with money and gear they didn't know how to use. And he knew that Elena wasn't a pretender. The shooting wasn't good for a hobbyist. It was professional, dangerous, and the way those rich kids had treated her made his stomach turn. Something about it all felt wrong. Worse, something about it felt unfinished outside. The black SUV still sat in the parking lot. But now, it wasn't alone. Another dark vehicle rolled up beside it. The two men inside spoke briefly. Then one made a call, urgent, low-voiced. The kind of call that didn't wait. Until morning, inside the range, no one noticed. They were too busy laughing, too busy posting, too busy congratulating themselves for putting a stranger in her place. They didn't see the storm they'd set in motion, but they would soon. Why did the room fall so silent when the woman with the badge walked in? Precision Point had been buzzing for hours. Phones pinging, laughter spilling across the polished floor. Jessica's smug voice rising above the rest as she refreshed. Her feet again and again, but then the door opened and everything changed. The woman who stepped in didn't look like the shooters here. No tactical vest, no designer boots, just a simple business suit. Dark, neat, without flash, but the badge, clipped to her jacket, silenced every conversation in the room. Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Inspector General. The letters were clear. Official, heavy. She didn't smile, didn't scan the trophy cases or look impressed by the marble floors. She walked straight to the counter, her voice calm, but sharp enough to cut through the air. I'm looking for information about a woman who was here yesterday, she said. Sarah, behind the counter, blinked fast. Her cheerful customer service smile didn't seem to work on this woman. Who? Elena Martinez, the agent replied, flipping open a folder with quiet authority. I understand there was an incident. The word hung there, incident. The room shifted. Conversations died. Even Jessica's phone stopped buzzing as she lowered it slightly, her heartbeat quickening. What kind of information? Sarah asked, voice cracking just slightly. How she was treated. The agent said simply, whether there were any problems, whether any of your members engaged with her. Inappropriately, she pulled a tablet from her bag and turned it toward the counter. Jessica's viral post filled the screen. Elena mid-aim, her scars exposed, the cruel caption plastered underneath. The hashtags, the comments, the likes, the room seemed to shrink. This, the agent said, her voice still quiet, suggests otherwise. Jessica's smirk vanished. The color drained from Sarah's face. Marcus Webb shifted on his feet, his pride suddenly feeling like an anchor. The agent's name was Carol Stevens. She wasn't there for a polite conversation. Social media posts mocking a military veteran, she said, her voice steady but colder now. Harassment based on appearance, on economic status. That could constitute violations of several federal anti-discrimination statutes. Nobody breathed. Jessica swallowed hard. Her voice, once confident and cruel, now stammered. We don't control what our customers post. No, Stevens agreed. But you control the environment that enabled it. Her gaze swept the room. Every single one of them felt it land. "I'll need to speak with everyone who was here yesterday," she added. The air seemed to get heavier with every word. Jessica shifted her weight, trying to stay casual. But her outfit, the custom tactical vest, the spotless boots, made her stick out like neon in a blackout. Stevens walked directly to her lane. "Miss Chun," she said. Jessica's throat went dry. "Yes? Your social media accounts show you were quite active yesterday." Jessica's voice wobbled. "I was just sharing my experience. Freedom of speech, right?" Stevens didn't blink. "Certainly. But harassment of a military veteran raises different legal questions, especially—" She paused, just long enough for the silence to sting. "When that veteran holds certain security clearances you aren't authorized to know about." Jessica froze. "Security clearances?" The words sliced through the tension like a knife. Marcus's chest tightened. He'd been studying Elena's targets again, thinking about her impossible precision. Now the puzzle pieces started clicking. Too perfect, too calm, too much. He'd been right to be suspicious, but wrong, so wrong, about the reason. Stevens turned back to the group, her expression flat, professional, but her words loaded like bullets. "I want all social media posts about Miss Martinez removed. Immediately. Any photos, any videos, any commentary. Failure to comply could result in federal charges related to harassment of protected individual." Protected individual. The phrase hit like a cold splash of water. Brad Thompson, the businessman who'd lied about membership fees, to push Elena off lane 12, finally spoke. "What does that mean?" Stevens faced him, her tone measured. "It means Elena Martinez isn't just any veteran. Her service record includes classifications that make her personal information sensitive. From a national security perspective, for a heartbeat, the entire range seemed to stop breathing. National security, classifications, protected individual. These weren't words for ordinary people. They weren't words for a woman in a gray hoodie and worn sneakers. Tommy Rodriguez felt a chill run through him, and also a jolt of recognition. He told them he'd seen something in her stance, her bearing. He'd known she wasn't just another walk-in. Her shooting, he said quietly to Stevens. Stepping closer, that wasn't hobby level. That was professional, military standard, maybe higher. Stevens glanced at him, then nodded. "You recognized what the others didn't." Jessica's hand shook as she deleted her viral post, the notification still buzzing as she wiped away what she could, but not fast enough. Not before screenshots spread, not before the damage was done and outside in the parking lot. The black SUV didn't leave, in fact. It wasn't alone anymore. 2 more vehicles had joined it, unmarked. Their occupants spoke into radios inside. Agent Stevens' presence had shifted everything, but it was only the beginning, because the storm was bigger than anyone in that room. Understood. The laughing had stopped. The phones were silent, and for the first time all morning, the wealthy shooters who thought they ran this place were beginning to understand a simple, terrifying truth. They weren't the ones in control anymore. Why did every head in the range turn when the second door opened? The first agent had shifted the air in the room, but the man who stepped through now, he didn't just shift it. He owned it. Tall, gray hair, cut close, no badge clipped to his jacket because he didn't need one. The brass on his shoulder boards, 4 stars, said everything. A general, not the retired kind, not the golf course and charity banquet kind. No. This man carried the kind of weight you only get from decades of command. From leading when the sky was burning and the radios wouldn't stop screaming. The conversations that had started to timidly return after Agent Stevens' arrival died. Instantly, Jessica's phone slipped slightly in her hand. Marcus Webb actually stepped back, his confidence folding in on itself like paper in the rain. The general's eyes swept the room. Not fast, not hurried, slow, deliberate. Every person felt that gaze land on them like a weight they couldn't shake. Then he spoke, his voice low, rough with age and command. "Where is she?" No name, no explanation, but everyone knew who he meant. Agent Stevens gestured toward the door. "She left yesterday," she said, calm, deferential. "But we've been monitoring the situation." The general's jaw clenched, just once, tight. "I want every post, every photo, every comment about her gone," he said. "Now." Jessica fumbled with her phone. Brad Thompson grabbed his. Marcus pulled his out so fast it nearly dropped. But the general wasn't watching their phones. He was looking at the targets still taped to lane 12. The torn-out bullseyes, the perfect clusters. He stepped closer. The polished floor creaking under his boots. He stared for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, it wasn't to anyone in particular. "She's still that good," he said quietly. The words landed heavy, almost reverent. Nobody breathed. Jessica found her voice first, soft, tentative, like a student caught cheating. Who is she?" The general turned, and for the first time, his voice cracked, just slightly. "She's the reason some of you get to sit here in designer boots and laugh," he said. "She's the reason some of you made it home. Even if you don't know it." The room was silent, but the words echoed. Marcus Webb's chest tightened. The puzzle pieces were snapping into place. The impossible precision, the scars, the silence about her past. He hadn't been outshot by some woman who didn't belong. He'd been outshot by someone who had lived with a weapon in her hand when it mattered most. And suddenly his trophies, his patches, his tournaments felt like toys. Jessica tried to laugh. Just a breath. Just enough to pretend she wasn't shaken. "We didn't mean." She started. The general's gaze snapped to her, sharp as a drawn blade. "Didn't mean?" he repeated. "Didn't mean to humiliate her? Didn't mean to make her scars into a joke?" Jessica's throat closed. The phone in her hand suddenly felt like a brick. Brad Thompson, pale now, cleared his throat. She really was military?" The general's face hardened. She was more than military. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Every syllable carried decades of authority. "She ran missions you'll never hear about," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "Saved lives you'll never know were in danger. Buried friends whose names you'll never read in any book." His hand brushed the target papers. The bullet holes clustered so tight they looked like one. "And you turned her into a punchline." Tommy Rodriguez, standing near the safety station, straightened instinctively. He'd suspected. He'd known something was off, that Elena wasn't just another shooter. But hearing it confirmed hit him like a gut punch. "General," Tommy asked quietly, "why is she here? At a range like this?" The man's eyes softened, for the first time since he walked in. "Because after everything she's done for this country," he said, "this is where we leave people like her, to fend for themselves, to carry the scars alone." He didn't shout it. He didn't need to. The shame in the room thickened like smoke. Outside, the black SUVs hadn't moved. If anything, there were more of them now. 3, 4 engines off, but men inside, watching, waiting. The storm gathering at the edges of Precision Point was bigger than anyone inside had dared to imagine. The general turned back to Agent Stevens. "I want her found," he said simply. Stevens nodded. "We have a team on it." Jessica finally spoke, voice small now. What will you say to her?" The general's face, that granite-hard mask, shifted for just a moment. And in that flicker, something like guilt lived there. "I'll tell her what none of you thought to say," he said softly. Then his jaw tightened. "And I'll tell her what I should have said a long time ago." In the silence that followed, every person in that room felt it. This wasn't just about a post or a meme or a few cruel words. It was about everything they didn't know about her, everything they didn't see, and the terrible weight of realizing that their laughter might have been the thing that finally broke. Someone who'd already carried more than anyone ever should. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. Because as the general stood in that spotless, polished range, Elena Martinez was somewhere else, unaware of the storm converging and unaware that the people who mocked her were about to learn who they had mocked. Why did she stare at her own reflection like she barely recognized the woman looking back? Elena's apartment was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her gray hoodie folded neatly on the counter beside her. The scars stared back at her, long, jagged, pale rivers twisting from her wrist up past her elbow, disappearing beneath the short sleeve of her t-shirt. She traced one with her finger. Even after all these years, she could still feel the heat, the weight of the metal, the smell of burning rubber. It had been Afghanistan. 2011. The convoy wasn't supposed to be on that road. She told them as much. The intel was off. The route wasn't secure. But orders were orders, and she followed them, like she always had. The memory came in pieces, jagged flashes. As she leaned over the sink, the morning sky, hazy and pink, the sound of a distant prayer call, the thin strip of asphalt cutting through dust. Then, the world exploded, a blinding light, a deafening roar. The Humvee flipped, metal screaming, glass shattering. When she came to, she was upside down. Her arm was pinned between the door frame and what was left of the dash. She couldn't move. Smoke poured in, hot and choking. She could hear someone screaming. Then she realized it was her. The blast had set off a chain reaction, fuel leaking, fire spreading. Her team, the ones who could still move, scrambled to pull the others out. She felt hands on her shoulders, voices shouting over the roar. "We can't get her free. Try again." She stuck. The fire reached the cab. Heat seared her skin. The metal of the door turned molten under her arm. That's where the scars came from. Not a tattoo, not an accident, not something to joke about. They were the proof of what it cost to survive. The medic said she was lucky. Lucky she didn't lose the arm. Lucky she didn't lose her life. She didn't feel lucky. She felt heavy, broken. The kind of broken that no amount of surgeries or metals could fix. 3 weeks in. A field hospital, staring at white ceilings and morphine drips. 3 names from her unit didn't make it home. She still saw their faces. At night, sometimes, she still heard their voices. She didn't talk about any of it. Not to the nurses. Not to the officers who stopped by with carefully worded sympathy. Not even to her family when she called home. Voice flat, saying, "I'm okay," because that's what they needed to hear. When she finally left the military, she didn't go out in a blaze of glory. There was no parade, no speeches, just a form signed, a box packed, and a bus ride home. And now? Now she stood in a tiny apartment, looking at the proof of all of it carved into her skin. Proof that strangers with expensive rifles and perfect nails had turned into captions and hashtags. She shut the light off. The mirror went dark. Across town, in a government briefing room, the general stood with his hands on a table, staring at a folder marked classified inside. Photos, missions, reports, and at the center of every page, Staff Sergeant Elena Martinez. Her record wasn't just military. It was black ink missions, names redacted, outcomes never spoken aloud. Recon in mountains too cold to breathe in. Extraction under fire when the comms went dead. Negotiations that never made headlines, but prevented things that would have. She wasn't just another soldier. She was the one they called when things were too delicate, too dangerous, too close to breaking. The general's hand hovered over one photo, a younger Elena. In desert camo, dirt on her face, eyes steady even then. He remembered that look. The one that said, "I'll handle it." The one that carried weight no one should have to carry. And he remembered the day she walked away, quietly, no fanfare, no requests, just gone. He hadn't stopped her. He told himself she'd earned her peace. But deep down, he knew better. He knew they'd let her leave because they didn't know what to do with her anymore. And now, Now she was being mocked by people who couldn't have lasted a day where she'd been. He closed the folder. "I should have called her years ago," he muttered. In that polished range, where laughter had once echoed, shame still hung heavy. Marcus Webb stared at his phone. His posts already deleted, but it didn't matter. The screenshots lived on. So did the guilt. He remembered the smugness in his voice when he'd called her lucky. How small those words felt now. Jessica Chun scrolled through her own feed, deleting, but for the first time, the screen didn't feel like power. It felt like evidence. Evidence of who she'd been yesterday and who she didn't want to be tomorrow. Back in her apartment, Elena sat on the edge of her bed. The duffel was at her feet, the Beretta still inside. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring. Then again. Finally, she picked up. Martinez. The voice on the other end said, low, measured, carrying a tone she hadn't heard in years. She froze. It wasn't just anyone. It was him, the general, the man who hadn't spoken her name in over a decade. "Elena," he said quietly. There was no rank in his voice, no command. "Just wait. We need to talk." Why did her hand shake when she set the phone down? The voice on the other end still echoed in her ears. "We need to talk." It wasn't an order, but it felt heavier than any command she'd ever received. Elena sat there for a long moment on the edge of her bed, the phone still in her hand, staring at the wall like it might tell her what to do. Her hoodie was still folded on the counter. Her duffel bag sat by the door. The scars on her arm caught the dim light, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was back in uniform, waiting for something she couldn't yet see. Across town, the convoy arrived. The black SUVs that had been idling for days weren't just surveillance anymore. They were an escort now. The general stepped out first. He wasn't the kind of man who knocked. But that night, he did. 3 sharp knocks. Not demanding, not soft, just final. Elena opened the door. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The years between them filled the hallway. He looked older, grayer. But his presence, that was the same. "Elena," he said finally, the weight of her name like something he'd been carrying too long. She didn't smile, didn't step aside right away. She just stared at him, the smallest flicker of something. Resentment? Sorrow. Behind her calm. "General," she said, her voice flat. He stepped inside only when she moved. Her apartment was small, unadorned. 1 chair, 1 couch, a plant that looked like it needed saving. The general stood there, not looking around, not commenting, just present. Then he said what men like him rarely say. "I owe you an apology." Elena blinked. Of all the things she expected, that wasn't it. "I should have called," he continued, his voice quieter now, the command gone. "When you left, I told myself you deserved peace, that you wanted space, but the truth is, I didn't know what to do with someone like you once the mission stopped, so I did nothing. And that was wrong." Her jaw tightened, just slightly. "You left me out there," she said. The words weren't angry, exactly. They were tired. He didn't deny it. "I did." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Finally, Elena sat. "Why now?" The general didn't hesitate. "Because they mocked you," he said simply. "Because they turned you into a joke, and because I watched it happen. And I couldn't stay silent anymore." Her eyes dropped to the scars on her arm. They mocked. "The scars," she said softly. He looked at them too, but not like the others had. Not like they were strange or ugly. He looked at them like they were familiar, like he'd seen too many soldiers with the same map carved into their skin. "They mocked the scars," he said, "but they didn't know what it cost you to have them." The memory of fire and metal flickered through her mind. Uninvited, she stayed quiet. He kept speaking. "You carried this country on your back," he said, "on missions they'll never know, in places they'll never see. And when you came home, we didn't carry you." The words hung there, and for a moment she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not anger, not guilt, but the smallest flicker of something like validation. He set a folder on her table. Inside, photos she hadn't seen in years. Her team, her unit, missions that had blurred in memory, and a single medal she'd never collected. Her name etched in the back. She stared at it. The Bronze Star. She'd been told it existed, but she never went to claim it. It had felt wrong, somehow. It's yours, he said. It always was. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She hadn't in years. You didn't come here just to hand me this, she said. He shook his head. No, I came here to make sure you know this. You are not forgotten, and you are not worthless. Not to the people who know the truth. Not to me. The words landed slow, heavy, true, across town. The posts were gone, deleted, buried. But the shame lived on in the people who'd made them. Jessica Chun hadn't slept. Her phone, once a weapon, now felt like a mirror she didn't want to look into. Marcus Webb hadn't touched his pistol since the general's visit. He kept staring at Elena's perfect grouping, replaying every smug word he'd said, feeling them rot in his chest. Tommy Rodriguez, the safety officer, was the only one who felt something else entirely. Quiet respect. Because from the first shot, he'd seen her, and he was glad the world was finally catching up. In her apartment, the general stood to leave. He didn't offer orders, didn't try to pull her back into the world she'd left. He just paused at the door, turned to her one last time, and said softly, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. Elena, it simply acts." When the door shut behind him, she sat back down on her bed. The folder still open, the metal still shining, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the scars were just scars. They were proof, not of what had broken her, but of what she had survived. And somewhere, someone would hear this story. They'd remember her name, and maybe, just maybe, they'd think twice before they laughed, because some stories don't need shouting. Some don't need hashtags. They just need to be told.